look at our PowerPoint here. So we talked about steno. And so here we're looking at some shells. Here's some shells in 400 million year old sandstones. These are called brachiopods. In fact, I have some of these. I'll show you in a moment. Here's some fossil leaves. In fact, these are carbonized impressions, carbonization there. And here is a fossil skeleton of looks like a mesosaur, right? Mesosaur is a reptile here, freshwater reptile. And then here's some fossil fish and some specimens in there. Now, fossilization here, your book describes a dinosaur on a hot day, succumbs to the weather, dies along the shore of a river, leaves some trackways behind, similar to our Dilophosaurus, right? But then over time, the flesh rots away, but the river floods, and it floods sooner enough to bury the organism, right? And then more and more flooding, more activity occurs to bury this deeper. And remember, there's burial compaction, lithification to make this strata an actual sedimentary rock. Then over time, there's erosion, weathering and erosion that exposes the dinosaur, and a lucky paleontologist discovers a fossil here. And here is an example of whole body fossil. This is a young baby mammoth found in Siberia. Died about 37,000 years ago during the last ice age. It was buried. And then we have some skeletons. There's a giant sloth. Here is actually an insect in amber here. And then we have hard body parts. So here's some shells. Looks at some other brachiopods and other organisms here. Invertebrates, which lack a backbone. And then here's some carbonization. Again, some fossil ferns here. Permineralization is a process of, again, where new minerals precipitate in the pore spaces, right? And then trace fossils. So I showed you my trace fossil. Here's some other footprints in here. Here's some worm burrows or worm trackways. In fact, I think there's a quiz question. When we see a rock like this and we see these burrows or these sole marks protruding outwards, we're looking at the bottom of the bed, right? So like this is protruding out, we're looking at the bottom of the bed, right? So this would be the bottom. Where there's an indentation, we're looking at the top of the bed. So that would be the top of the strata. And then here are some microfossils. These are primarily pollen. Different types of pollen, again, will be distinctive as to the climate that occurred during this time. And then here is an extraordinary fossil where there was rapid burial here in this oil shale. Here's a squirrel that's about 50 million years old. You can see some skin and some fur that was fossilized. And then here is a really unique fossil that really kind of changed ideas in terms of dinosaurs and the relationship to birds. And really, if you talk to paleontologists, they'll say that dinosaurs are not extinct. The birds are the modern. In fact, they call birds avian dinosaurs, right? And so here's Archaeopteryx, a 150 million year old dinosaur, clearly with feathers, right? So clearly with feathers. So if you look at these fossils, you'll see that these they have teeth. So obviously birds don't have teeth today, and they have these claws on their wings right here. But clearly feathers. And taxonomy refers to the classification and naming of organisms. And there is this Claudius Linnaeus, a Swedish scientist, was really took the huge task of classifying all life. And it really starts with this kingdom, this family. But even before that, now we try to classify life into three broad domains. And the three domains include bacteria, archaea, and then eukarya, right? And so here we're looking at some proto-life, right? And one thing that all life has, and what all of us should understand, no matter if you're a simple single-cell bacterium or archaea, all life has DNA. And remember, DNA is the blueprint for life. It's going to tell the cells, it's going to send off enzymes, it's going to build an organism, right? And that's the blueprint for life, DNA. And so there are two types of cells. A prokaryote cell is a cell without a nucleus, very simple cells, very small, whereas eukaryotic cells are larger cells. They do have a central nucleus, and they also have organelles or mitochondria. So it's kind of a community of cells working together. And so you'll see that animals, plants, fungi, more complex organisms are going to be part of this eukarya. And then we'll see that bacteria and archaea make two separate branches as well. Now, the other thing about bacteria, archaea, and eukarya is that they differ on the gene characteristics. Remember, genes are segments of the DNA molecule, and those segments of the DNA molecule have the genetic information to build the organism, right? And so one thing about bacteria, there's one type called cyanobacteria, which are important. They're photosynthetic, they're producers, they do photosynthesis. And then there's also the decomposing bacteria, right? So we call this more of a common bacteria. And one thing about decomposing bacteria, they're said to be consumers. So they have to eat organic molecules. In essence, what they're doing, they're breaking the organic molecules down. They're recycling the nutrients. Now, archaea, they love to live in extreme environments. That's what they're called, extremophiles. Remember, philos means love. So they love extreme environments. They love hot springs, these hot mid-oceanic ridges in the middle of the ocean. They're in desert salt flats. They're in glaciers, and they produce a chemical energy, and they don't really need the sun. They use chemical reactions, so they're often called chemosynthetic, right? So in other words, they produce organic molecules similar to the photosynthesis, but instead of using the sun, they use chemical reactions that are chemical bonds in minerals. So archaea are very strange. Some scientists think that these may have been some of the first forms of life on Earth. And if we go back to our prokaryote cells, they're simple, they're small, they lack a nucleus. They do have DNA, right? But the DNA is free-floating within the cell, right? And then if we look at the eukaryotic cells, so these are a little bit more complex. They're larger, 50 to 100 times larger than the prokaryotes. They do have a central nucleus that contains the DNA, right? But they also have organelles, and these would be the organelles, the mitochondria, that provide special functions like metabolism. In plants, there's one called chlorophyll, which does photosynthesis, right? But these mitochondria are really in the 1970s, it was discovered that these also have their own DNA. In fact, they call it mitochondria or mDNA, which leads scientists to conclude that maybe to make these more complex eukaryotic cells, a community of simple prokaryotes got together, making one the central DNA, central nucleus, and they got together in a symbiotic relationship, right? So this symbiotic relationship to make these more complex cells. Then if we look at eukarya, that's where you get these more complex cells. Here are the community of prokaryotes. That's one of the ideas. So all have eukaryotic cells, eukarya. So what I like to do, I like to kind of break life in the number of cells and the mode of nutrition. So all life can be categorized under those three categories: type of cell, number of cells, and mode of nutrition. And with those criteria, we can designate these kingdoms of life, right? So remember, both the bacteria and archaea are prokaryotes. They're all single-celled organisms. Bacteria are mostly are either going to be autotrophic, which are the cyanobacteria, blue-green algae, or they're going to be the decomposing bacteria, whereas the archaea are primarily autotrophs, right? And they're getting that chemical energy, the chemosynthesis, right? Living in the extreme environments. And then the other kingdoms here, Protista, fungi, Plantae, Animalia, all these are going to have the more complex eukaryotic cells. Protista is an interesting kingdom, and this kingdom, there are some organisms that are single-celled and some that are multi-celled. And so the single-cell ones, well, there's lots of plankton, There's also amoebas and paramecium, stuff you see in pond water. Those are single-celled, and they're called protozoans. Later on, in fact, we did talk about some protozoans. We talked about foraminifera and radiolaria, and those are essentially amoebas with shells. Now, when they die, they sink to the seafloor and leave deposits of radiolarian ooze or foraminifera ooze, right? Also, other types are diatoms and coccolithophores, and they're also responsible for leaving marine sediment. And then Protista, there's a multicell group, and those are the seaweeds, like the kelp, the green algae, the red algae, brown algae. And they do photosynthesis, but they differ than plants, right? In that the multicellular Protista seaweeds live in seawater, right? And they shed their gametes into the water. Now, the next group here are the fungi. Fungi, again, multicellular, and they're consumers. One interesting thing about the fungi is that they have what's said to be external digestion. So in other words, they don't have a mouth. I always say a mushroom. Have you seen a mushroom with a mouth? No mushrooms with mouths, right? And so they have to break down the organic molecules and then bring the nutrients through their body walls, right? That's why mushrooms and fungi are kind of slimy, right? And then we also have plantae, which are the plants. And plants do photosynthesis, right? And the photosynthesis, here I say that they're producers and they're making organic molecules. Autotroph, remember, troph means to feed. So they feed themselves, right? And then finally, Animalia, multicell consumers, right? Animals must eat. We don't make our own food. We have to eat other organisms. What's this taxonomy, this phylogenetic system, right? And so the key, you'll see that the kingdom are the groups of life, and again, characterized by mode of nutrition, number of cells, and type of cells. But now the next major group is phylum. And the phylum is the animals share a similar body plan, right? And you'll see that there's below phylum, there's class, and there's order, families, genus, and species. And again, all these depend on either morphology, the body plan. In fact, let's look at a PowerPoint real quick. There is a point here. So when we're looking at the PowerPoint, we see that here we have the domain, which is eukarya, right? So there's also archaea and bacteria. And then the kingdom, well, we got Protista, fungi, Animalia, and Plantae, right? So from here, we'll look at Animalia, and we got Chordata as an important phylum. So the chordates, like us, fish, reptiles, amphibians, we all share a backbone. And that backbone has a nerve cord. So this is the nerve cord that encases the backbone. But you can see there's the worm phyla, the sponges, the echinoderm, spiny skin. So they all share that body plan. In fact, the mollusks have that head-foot body plan, right? Arthropods have an exoskeleton, right? And then as we go to the class, mammals, right? Mammalia, so we all have fur, we have mammary glands, right? Whereas, you can see there's bony fishes, there's also chondrichthyes, which are the cartilaginous fishes, right? And there's also amphibians, aves, again, they're chordates, right? All these are chordates. But then as we go to order, well, there's primates, which are monkeys, gorillas, humans, right? But there's also carnivores, giraffes, deer, cattle, artiodactyls. Another one called perissodactyls, which are the horses and rhinoceroses. There's rodents, there's marsupials, right? And then family, there's hominids, and then there's genus and species. So you can see how it kind of breaks down this classification of life here.